Hi, friends. Welcome to Encouraged and Equipped. On this podcast, we introduce you to the women of Christ Chapel Bible Church.
We love being encouraged to live out our faith in Jesus by hearing the stories of women in our church community. We are so glad that you're here.
Welcome back to another episode of Encouraged and Equipped. It's Brooke, and I'm sitting here with Camille, and you are about to be super blessed, I think, by listening to a conversation that Kathy had with our friend Olivia Tokar. Olivia's so wise. She had so many good things to say. Camille, I know you were super encouraged and really enjoyed that conversation. What's something that really blessed you that you think the listeners will be excited to hear?
Well, it is. I think you're going to be so encouraged by it. Olivia's fantastic and so wise. We have been talking all day about how wise she is. But one of the things she said that stuck out to me was that it can be a mercy of the Lord to have him guide us in the unknown or uncertainty. And I thought that was such a great description of how we can shift our perspective and focus on the kindness of the Lord in those moments. And really, this conversation is such a beautiful glimpse into Olivia's experience of God's kindness in all these moments of uncertainty. And so, listener, we're really excited for you to hear it. And here they are, Kathy and Olivia.
Hi, I get to be with Olivia Tokar today, and we are going to be talking about something that I know we all have experienced, and that is unknowns. So, Olivia, thanks so much for being here.
I'm so excited to be here.
Wonderful. I am excited to talk to you and get to hear your thoughts on walking through unknowns, because my guess is that a lot of people have some of the questions that you and I have, which is like, what do I do when I can't see past what the next turn is? Am I alone in this uncertainty? Maybe how do I walk through this in a way that I understand God's purpose? I think we have a whole lot of questions, and I know that you have wrestled through those questions and have come to kind of share what God has taught you and what you're still learning. And so I'm so grateful you're here.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm so grateful to be here.
Well, I want to kind of maybe start off with us just getting to know you a little bit more, especially in regards to the unknowns. Would you be willing to share maybe some of the unknowns you've walked through where you've learned some of these lessons?
Absolutely. So I just turned 22, which I feel like sort of indicates that like I've been through a lot of unknowns recently with college and deciding where to go to school, waiting to see where I would get accepted, trying to figure out like, is the major that I chose actually what I want to do? How am I supposed to know what I want to do with my life? I got engaged a few months ago, so walking through not only wedding planning, but more importantly, preparing my heart for marriage and what that looks like. I've gone through a season in college of like a medical unknown, I guess you could call it, like just being really sick and not knowing why, and it taking a bit to get all that sorted out. So throughout the past 3 years, the Lord has definitely given me a lot of opportunities to grow in trust for him, which I'm super thankful for, but they're also just hard in the moment.
Okay, so you kind of gave me a clue to maybe an answer to my next question. Some people, I think, enjoy unknowns. Are you someone that enjoys unknowns usually, or are you usually struggle a little bit with them?
I definitely struggle with them. I am a big planner. I like to know what my plan is for the next years of my life. I like to have multiple different backup plans in case one of those fails, and then plenty of time to come up with a new plan in case that seventh backup plan fails. And so I feel like I either can freak out and feel like I have no idea what I'm going to do and feel very down on myself and feel a lot of pressure to make a decision and that I'm really far behind. But sometimes I enter an unknown that I feel like I've walked through before. And so then I get a little prideful and I'm like, well, okay, I've been through this. Like, I know what to do. I don't really need to worry about it. And on both ends of the spectrum of that, I'm not trusting the Lord. I'm leaning on myself, and that either destroys my ego or puffs it up. And I just am focused on myself and my own mind the whole time rather than seeking the Lord and what he has for me.
I really appreciate that you started off by talking about and being vulnerable about what the struggle is, because I can relate to both of those things, to be honest. And I know we're going to get a whole lot more into what God's taught you, but while you've chosen to be vulnerable with us, would you be willing to share maybe what are some of those things you run to for comfort, or where have you found yourself tempted to turn instead of the Lord?
I think a lot of times distraction for me is a big one. Instagram Reels, to be honest. Like, it's just easy now. You have so many outlets to go to media or to music even, like not inherently sinful things, but things that can just kind of, when you're stressed, you just go self-soothe a little bit and you watch something and it takes your mind off of it. And then you're like, okay, well, I guess I'll just figure it out. So that is a big one, honestly. And then sometimes I feel like I run to guidance from friends, but in such a way that it's like, pick the friend I ask for advice for based on what I think I want to hear.
Well, now that is personally hurts me because I've done that before.
I know. It's like, man, I really need advice on this, but I kind of know what outcome I am hoping to have. And so I'll just go ask this friend because she usually gives me advice in a way that I think I would like to hear right now. So those are definitely ways that I think are not the best that I tend to run to sometimes when I get stressed out and making a decision or facing a situation that I don't know the outcome for.
Yeah, I can totally understand that as well. As we think about unknowns, I think there's a variety of ways we can look at it. And some unknowns are things where you're literally just waiting. Like when you apply to college, like you don't get to decide the day that they send you an acceptance or rejection or wait list. You're literally waiting. And so talk to me a little bit about what those seasons where you've just been waiting, kind of unable to determine when the unknown will end, and what did God teach you in those seasons?
For sure. I think something that I've learned, especially recently, is that it's important just to start by being thankful for the hope that we have in Jesus. When we don't know what steps to take or what the outcome of a situation will be, we already know that what we need the most and long for the most has been graciously given to us, and that is a way to be with God. Psalm 62 states over and over that it's David, and he's saying that he waits for the Lord, who alone is his refuge and his salvation. So there immediately in any situation is comfort and knowing that God has provided us a way to be with him. But then another thing that I think I've been thinking about recently is it's easy to say like, okay, well, I need to not put my hope in this outcome. But sometimes when I don't want something to happen, I'm putting all of my hope in getting out of it. And then in my mind, that's not me placing my hope in something because it's not like, oh, I really want this thing to happen. Like I'm going to make that an idol. I'm like, well, I'm not doing that. I'm not idolizing this outcome. But really I am, because I'm idolizing getting out of an outcome. Does that make sense? Like I'm hoping in something still, even if it's hoping to get out of something. And so I think we need to just make an effort to trust God that if we don't get what we want, or maybe if we don't get out of what we don't want, like he is still good and he is still with us and we have a way to be with him.
I think that it's really interesting that you start with gratitude, because I'm a person that does not love unknowns. And so the fact that you start with gratitude, like, is helpful for me, because that's almost never my first choice. It is either, Lord, what is the wisdom, particularly that can quickly move me through this process?
Yes.
Because I don't enjoy unknowns usually. And so I think that call to gratitude, and even call to think about where my hope is, kind of pushes me past the circumstance to the Lord. And so those are actually helpful for me, not just to say, hey, take it to the Lord, but how do I take unknowns to the Lord? And to take my unknown to the Lord through gratitude or through thinking of him as my hope gives me kind of some direction of what I can talk to him about, other than just give me wisdom and help me out of that. So I really appreciate the way you framed that, because I think that that can be a helpful way for me to talk to the Lord about my unknowns that isn't just full of a whole lot of angst.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think another thing that has been really comforting to me, especially in just waiting for something, it's not a decision I get to make, it just is what's going to happen, is knowing that no matter where the Lord places me in life, my ultimate purpose can be achieved through seeking him and bringing glory to him. I have this really distinct memory of when I was a junior in high school driving to take the ACT, and there was this beautiful sunrise, but I was so stressed because I needed to get a certain score in order to get a scholarship to go to a school I needed to go to. And I was just very anxious, but the Lord comforted me in that moment and reminded me that, like, no matter what college I end up at, my purpose is not to get a certain degree or to make a certain friend group or to be a certain place. It's just to bring him glory and to seek him continually and seek to find my joy ultimately in just seeing what he wants me to do moment by moment and blessing the communities that I'm in and obeying him in whatever that means in whatever situation I'm in. And that I can do that anywhere. Like I will be fulfilled and joy by him no matter where I end up. And so I think that that's another comforting thing and a very memorable moment of how my mindset changed.
I like that as well because it reminds me that even in the unknown, there is a known. And that known is I have certain biblical purposes or callings or commands or opportunities regardless of where I am.
Yes,
so
absolutely.
Everything about where you go to college isn't unknown. Like you may not know the specific school title, but you have some general and sometimes very specific knowns regardless of where you go to school. So everything isn't unknown, even in an unknown.
Yeah, I love the way that you put that. That's very comforting. And I hadn't thought of it that specific way before.
Okay, so you've been kind of walking us through these situations where you've been waiting on the Lord. Are there any others that come to mind or situations where you've been waiting or not quite sure what was going to happen? And what did God show you there?
I think a big example of this for me was a few years ago when an issue sort of arose in my relationship with me and my boyfriend at the time. It wasn't something so black and white that was like, okay, well, we need to break up. But it also wasn't something that I knew whether or not we were going to easily heal from, or I didn't know what the Lord wanted us to do in that situation.
Unknown.
It was very unknown. And I just remember I think it was like 6 or 7 weeks praying for guidance. And I mean, I met with you and I met with people that I trusted and sought direction from and just didn't feel peace either way. And 7 weeks in the grand scheme of things is not a long time, but it is when you're in a relationship and you don't know.
Every minute feels long. 7 weeks of minutes is a long time.
Yes. I didn't know whether I should be rebuilding or preparing my heart to leave. And so I was just praying one day and I finally just in that moment felt a lot of peace in the decision to leave the relationship. And it was not what I wanted to do. And it was hard. It was the hardest thing that I've ever done, I think. But the Lord just gave me a lot of peace. And looking back on that season, the timing was really good. And if I had known, I think a day sooner that I was going to end up breaking up with him, I wouldn't have been able to be a picture of God's grace and unconditional love in the way that he called me to in that season. And so I think that sort of taught me that it can be a mercy of the Lord, and it is a mercy of the Lord to guide us step by step and not always show me his plan 7 weeks in advance. He is guiding you and will give you peace when you need it to know what step to take. And sometimes that comes the day you need to take the step.
I think that's a really good insight into, and again, the Lord sees things from a different perspective than we do, that sometimes I'm not ready for the answer. And I can think that the Lord is somehow delaying and giving it to me, but you talking about God's mercy and kindness and not giving you the answer when you want it, I know that may not feel good in the moment, but it really can be a kindness of the Lord that he's not telling us what we need to do.
For sure. Yeah.
I love too how you've kind of been pointing towards the fact that it's not just an answer that you're looking for the Lord. And sometimes when I'm in an unknown, I'm going to the Lord, but I'm going to the Lord for an answer instead of for more of him. Do you have any thoughts on why it matters so much to you that you talk about or think about getting God and not just getting an answer?
Absolutely. I think that the ultimate comfort in any situation that we have that is unknown is that the unknown God has made himself known to us. It's a great thing to go to the Lord for wisdom and peace and unknowns. But I think that also when we go to God with the goal of getting something, we're making the thing that we want or the outcome that we want our goal in life. And I mean, honestly, as a result, I kind of feel like that gives us the same unstable meaning in life as any so-called secular person. If we're making what we want the reason that we're going to God, then we're not going to God to have a relationship with him or know him. And so it's definitely possible to obey God for the wrong reasons or to seek him for selfish reasons, I think. And what makes Christianity different than any other comfort or inspirational quote or any earthly guidance is that we get to know God, who has graciously revealed himself to us because we are undeserving to have knowledge of his holiness or glory. And realistically, like, it still will feel stressful to not know God's plan for you. That is just something that I think he teaches us trust in throughout our entire lives. And I've certainly walked through these situations, but I don't feel like I perfectly trust God by any means. And following the Lord doesn't always equal receiving earthly comfort. You know, he promises us that we'll face tribulations in this world, but to take heart because he's overcome the world. And so if our hope and reason for going to God is him making our path straight and flat, we're just going to be disappointed over and over again. So I think that following God and seeking him in unknowns is about the fulfilling joy of the personal relationship that we get to have with him through Jesus' sacrifice. It's not about having like a guardian who just plucks away every difficult thing that we face to make our life easy, which might sound nice, but ultimately his plan for us, though hard in the moment, is so much richer and better and full of sanctification that changes our hearts to be more like him. And that is so unbelievably worth it, even though it's really hard in the moment.
Can you think of a certain characteristic of God or something you learned about him in waiting? And I'm not going to say you couldn't have learned it somewhere else, but that seemed very meaningful to you, or that maybe you got to really taste of while you were waiting for something?
I would say his grace in allowing us to go through hard things, which is not something that is easy to say, but I think that it's a gift. And he says it's a gift to get to share in Christ's suffering, and to get to walk through seasons where we learn to trust him, because if a relationship is always easy, it doesn't deepen. And it's great to have those joyful moments. And I think that the Lord promises us joy in every moment, and not because it's easy, but because he's with us and has given us hope. But looking back on the seasons of my life that have felt difficult because they were unknown to me, I just have seen his grace in walking with me consistently as a loving father. Like, he's not out to get you because you've like not made the right decision and he withheld the answer from you, so now he's going to let you face all these consequences. Like, that's not how he is. He guides you as a loving father, full of grace and love. So yeah, I would just say definitely his grace and mercy and letting us experience difficult things so that we grow closer to him.
As we've been talking about unknowns, there is a season of unknown where we're just waiting for the answer. And we've kind of talked about that. But there's also a season in which you know what college you're supposed to go to, or you are starting the new job, but still that whole situation is unknown. And so when you're in a new situation that you've not been in before, how do you walk with God in that?
I think kind of a fun example of this is in the story of Daniel. We all know Daniel in the lion's den, but before he ended up there, his city was besieged and he was taken to a new land with a new culture and religion. And he lived in the king's palace in Babylon, where he was going to be taught literature and the new language and just be brought up in wisdom according to the king's standard of wisdom. And the food that they gave Daniel and the other Israelites who were with him was not explicitly described as being against God's Old Testament law for what they could and couldn't eat. I mean, it may have been pork. I think it said it was meat, but it didn't say that specifically. And they were given wine to drink, which was not against God's Old Testament law. Yet Daniel really sought to be set apart from the rest of the individuals who were brought to the king's palace by requesting that they have water and vegetables instead. And so this is just a really small picture of the importance of not being conformed to aspects of whatever culture or community you are in, even if they're not inherently sinful. And I think that this is something that's important to keep in mind when you enter a new place, is that you will face new temptations or new ways that you may want to think or act or speak. And that means something different, I think, for everybody. Like, maybe that means choosing not to partake in talking about somebody at work that maybe doesn't feel explicitly like gossiping, but it's probably just not the best thing to do. Or if you're around people who use cuss words a lot, choosing not to cuss, or maybe wearing clothes that don't meet the standard of modesty you feel called to by God. Wherever you go, there will be new temptations and new ways that you want to fit in. And so those aren't always bad, but I think just being intentionally aware of what those temptations are for you and what the Lord has for you instead is really important. Because in Romans 12:2, he says, "Do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewal of your mind, that by testing you may discern what is the will of God." So this doesn't mean to judge people. You can, I think, discern without being judgmental or rude or looking down on people. But if we're taking comfort in being able to live out our purpose anywhere, which is glorifying God, then when the time comes to do that, we need to do that. It's not just an encouraging thought 6 months in advance. Like when the time comes, it's time to seek how we can bring glory to God.
I think that what you've said is really convicting for me, or a really important reminder, because when I'm finally walking into an unknown situation, I am looking to see how I can fit in. And to an extent, that's not a bad thing.
No.
But I think to walk into an unknown thinking, how has God called me to be set apart, takes a lot of intentionality and thought, because I think my first inclination is, where can I fit and how can I be comfortable, instead of how can I be set apart? And I think that's a really countercultural way of thinking about how to step into an unknown.
Absolutely.
I know that you probably, like me, have walked with many friends, colleagues who are walking through unknowns. And for many of us, unknowns are challenging. What are ways that you have seen that are helpful to walk with people through unknowns? And what are some ways that maybe aren't quite as helpful?
I think it's important that when walking with someone who's going through an unknown situation, that it's important to have an empathetic response to them, because sometimes I feel like, especially for maybe people who open up to us that we don't know as well, it's just easy to say like, oh, just like pray about it. I'm sure the Lord will work it out. Like that's kind of dismissive, honestly. And sometimes you're in small talk and have to go, and that's just what you have to say. But ultimately, whenever you're outside a situation, it's so much easier not to worry. Just be like, well, of course it's going to be fine for you. Like, I don't know why you're so anxious. But when we walk through the situations, we know that it's a constant mental battle to not feel anxiety. And so no matter how much we trust God, grief and sadness are just a part of this broken world. And so I think it's important, as it says in Romans 12:15, to rejoice with those who rejoice and weep with those who weep, and to bear one another's burdens, so that when someone opens up to you, just walk with them and pray for them. And whatever time or resources the Lord has given you, you can volunteer those to encourage the friend that you have. And then also, I think the Lord uses our situations that we have been through to be able to bless other people and maybe say like, hey, I've walked through something similar and this is how the Lord was faithful. This is how I learned about God's goodness. So I think choosing to be vulnerable in a way that's encouraging to other people is something that can be difficult, but also really important and a good way to even be able to look back and reflect on how God has been good in your life in ways that you maybe hadn't processed before. But with that, I definitely face the temptation of wanting to have the right answers and wanting to be smart and wise. And especially in high school, I was the therapist of my friend group, and I took a lot of, I'm not going to deny pride in that, but also just identity and joy in having the right answers,
like to be
feeling
helpful.
wise. Yeah, I love to be helpful. So on one end of the spectrum, it's important that we walk with others in humility, knowing that we're not always going to have the right answers. And sometimes even if we think we do, it's important to not just immediately jump to oh, okay, great, I know what to say, but reflect and think, how can I genuinely treat this person in the way that the Lord wants me to? But also, I think there are times when somebody has said something to me and I'm like, I just have no idea how to respond to this. I don't know how to help you through that. I don't know exactly what to say. So no matter what end of the spectrum you feel on in those situations, your job is just to point your friend to Jesus. It's not to have the right answer, whether or not you feel like you do. It's to encourage them to deepen their relationship with the Lord. It's to encourage them to remember God's grace and to reflect on what He has done for them before and His faithfulness that He will take care of you again and again. So that's been comforting to me in times where I'm like, oh my gosh, I know exactly what to say, or I have no clue what to say.
I think we can all relate to that.
Yes.
I know a lot of the unknowns we've been talking about, not all of them, but a lot of them have been almost something that just wasn't our choice. And what I mean by that is you graduated from high school, you couldn't stay in high school forever. Mm-hmm. There are a lot of situations that an unknown is coming whether you want it to be there or not. But I think we're provided with a lot of opportunities to step into the unknown, and we don't have to take that choice. What does it look like when we have the choice to step into an unknown, but we don't necessarily have to?
I think something that comes to mind for me in those situations is, at least for me, I over-reflect on my own mindset and thinking of like, okay, well, I have this option, but is that what the Lord would want me to take or not? And I think that sometimes, at least for me, it feels easy to take faults for the times that I don't feel direct guidance from the Lord, in the sense that like, well, how am I thinking about this wrong? Or am I not considering what the Lord wants for me enough? Or am I not praying enough? Or am I not doing this and this enough? And then again, that just points it back on me and what am I doing instead of focusing on the Lord and what he wants. And so maybe you're on the other end of the spectrum and don't tend to reflect as much on, how are you thinking? Are you being humble? Are you making space for the Lord and to listen to his guidance? But at least for me, to get to that healthy middle ground, it looks like remembering that reflecting on the way that I am seeking the Lord's guidance and going to him should be an act of humility and trust, not of anxiety and urgency. And because it's important to remember that the Lord's timing is different than ours. And sometimes there might be times where you've been praying and the time comes to make the choice and you just don't feel guidance from the Lord. And I think that's okay in those instances to say, okay, well, I just am going to make the best decision that I can. And in that time, you've sought the Lord and you have sought his glory. And again, that goes back to what we were saying earlier, like he's not out to get you. He's not going to be like, well, you didn't make the right choice, so now things are going to be so bad for you. I don't think he's like that. I think he wants to love you and guide you. And if you don't feel explicit guidance in one thing or another, sometimes I think it's okay to make the choice that you think is best in that instance based on reflection and thinking through it.
I was just going to say, I think that's really wise because for overthinkers, I think sometimes we wait for this aha moment or the verse of scripture to drop down from the sky or 87 different counselors to all agree on the same thing or this peaceful wind to blow through and make it all whatever. And I'm not saying God can't do that, but a lot of times you pray, you go to the word, you get counsel, and you may not have some strong, clear indication, and you make the best decision you know to make and you go on. I think that can be a really helpful tool or really helpful thing for overthinkers and worriers about unknowns to hear. You can't mess up your life. And God loves you way too much. And so make the best decision you can and go forward.
Absolutely. And I think too that God is a God of peace and that anxiety is something that he doesn't want for us, even in times when we don't know exactly what we should be doing. He says to cast our anxieties on him because he cares for us. And I think that he has taught me that I can make a decision and think through what it would look like for both outcomes or try to figure out what I should be doing in a way that is peaceful and in a way that isn't full of anxiety, because I trust that he will guide me and give me that peace and that sense of direction if there's something that he wants for me. And if not, like you said, it doesn't have to be an aha moment and the stars don't have to align and spell out, you should do this. And like, it's not always going to be like that, and that's okay.
I want to talk for a minute about unknowns and those of us that are leery of them. Do you think there are times that we're too scared to step into an unknown and we miss out on things?
I think for me, there is. I think especially that comes with new community, and that friendships sometimes can feel difficult to build or scary to build. And so there's definitely been times where I wish that I had stepped outside of my comfort zone and gone and done new things and just trusted that the Lord would provide people, or even if it did feel uncomfortable, that like, it's okay for things to feel uncomfortable sometimes. Like they're just going to, especially if you tend to be more shy or more timid, that those feelings are okay to feel. And a lot of good can come from like being brave and doing something new.
I think about, my guess is the first time you led worship, because you do that often at the West Campus and other places as well, that how you feel about that opportunity and how you feel about being on the worship team now, my guess is they feel very different to you. Is that right?
Oh, for sure. I used to get so nervous that I would like shake and like hold my breath and all sorts of stuff. But now it was always a joyful thing to do. Like it kind of felt bad just because feeling scared isn't a good feeling. It's not fun. But the joy that I feel now in the community that has been so graciously gifted to me through that is so abundantly worth it. Like, I would still feel anxious to this day while playing piano if it meant still being able to be a part of the community and just the joy of getting to lead other people in worship. It's really sweet and definitely worth the anxious feelings sometimes.
I think about at Christ Chapel, we are talking about be, make, and reach, being a disciple, making disciples, and reaching disciples. And I think probably for many of us, the first time we step into that, or when we reach out to a new person or seek to disciple someone in a new way, there probably is a lot of angst or about that unknown, or some angst about that unknown. And yet, where would we be if we didn't step into those things? Like, if you hadn't said, yes, I'll serve on the worship team, like all the things you would have missed about community and who God is and getting to use your gifts and do something you enjoy. I think that is something that when we don't step into unknowns, we can just miss out on a lot of things.
Oh, for sure. I think it's really important to be willing to have the compassion for those around us, to be willing to step into situations that feel scary. And especially, I think that can go when reaching other people and sharing Christ, because that can be a scary thing to do. You don't know what to say. And that also is just an unknown for the person that you're sharing with. Maybe they don't know the gospel. Maybe they don't know about Jesus or what it's like to walk with him. And so you're presenting that to them in a way that feels unknown to both of you. But just having compassion and love for other people enough that we're willing to walk into situations that feel scary, I think is really important.
I think all of those things that you talked about when you were talking about who God is when we're waiting, like God is strengthening you. He's present with you. He's comforting you. He's providing what you need. He knows what he's doing. Those characteristics are true of him when we step into a situation that feels uncomfortable and unknown to us. He's present with us. He's equipping us. He's providing us his sufficiency. He knows what he's doing. And so I think all of the things that were true of God in the waiting part of the unknown are just as true of God when we step into an unknown where we're actually taking action.
Absolutely. Yeah, for sure.
I have thought about, because I think you and I are both ones who tend to overthink or maybe don't enjoy unknowns a whole lot. I do think there are probably some people that love stepping into unknowns. That's exciting for them. And so I just want to acknowledge, for those of you that are that way, I'm really glad, because you're a great example to me stepping into those things. But I also want to acknowledge that, or ask your wisdom, Olivia, what have you seen in them that you really appreciate? And what are some cautions that you might have for people that maybe don't think quite enough before they step into something?
I appreciate a lot. I think just the freedom that these individuals have who aren't scared of unknowns like I am. Like, it must be so freeing to be able to do something new and it be exciting and not feel kind of bad at the same time. So I think that is just a really huge blessing and a great character quality to have, which I want. If you have a way to tell me how to do it, please do. And I think that can also be a gift. And if your mind is not consumed by being worried, or the Lord has just gifted you a lot of trust in him and taught you that trust, then that's just a great opportunity to have the headspace to consider other ways that you can be glorifying the Lord or what he wants to teach you in that season. Because, I mean, for me, I've been talking about learning trust in the Lord through unknowns, but I think that really every situation in life is an unknown. There's so many things to learn through that, and to learn about the Lord and to learn about yourself and how the Lord wants you to grow. And so if you have the headspace and the freedom of mind to reflect on more than just trusting the Lord, then I think what a gift it is to be able to see other things that the Lord are teaching you through those seasons. And also that you get to be an encouragement to others to say, like, hey, it's going to be okay. Like, I get excited by new situations, and there's a lot of good to be seen in them. And what a blessing that is to be able to share that with other people who are like you and me, Kathy, who need that.
Yes. I know that you have a huge heart for evangelism, and you love people that know Jesus. You love people that don't know Jesus. As you've seen people walk through unknowns, have you noticed any distinctives, or how is it different if you walk through an unknown with the Lord or not with the Lord?
I think that this is something that honestly that I was just talking about with a friend the other day and learning through college is that is something that I was faced with and asked is, I'm walking through the same situation as a Christian that my friend who is not a Christian is walking through. And in my head and kind of growing up Bible belted and all my friends were from youth group, like the only way to make it through a hard situation was by trusting in the Lord. And then I was walking through this hard situation, trusting with the Lord. And so were they, and they made it through just the same as I did. And that kind of, I think, challenged me in a really good way to ask, like, what is different about my trust in the Lord versus their encouragement through an inspirational quote that like hypes them up and they go do this brave thing. And I think that what's interesting and what I learned from this is that it's the relationship that makes a difference. And that goes back to what we were talking about earlier about not going to God just to get something, not just to get comfort or not just to get wisdom for a certain outcome, which are things that he graciously gives to us and things that we should go to him for. But what makes it different than anything else is that we get to know him, and it's a friendship, and we're a child of a loving Father who teaches us and guides us, and it's just something that it's hard even to put into words. Like I'm trying to think of how to say it well, but I mean, it's just the same as you and me. We grow deeper in our friendship with each other, and that makes us rely on each other more. It teaches us how to trust each other. And it's just the same with the Lord. And that's something that grows and deepens over time. And also something that never fails because like, I'm not going to act perfectly all the time. Like, sure, my friends are smart. They're not foolish. They can make it through situations that are difficult. But I think there will come a day when they face something that they don't know how to handle. And I mean, I've always faced situations that I don't know how to handle. And so having the Lord to lean on and a loving Father to find peace in and hope in, and knowing that this life is not my only hope. Like I have a future in heaven with the Lord. That means it's okay to face hard things in this life. And it's not something that I always need to run from. If it feels difficult is what makes it so different.
Okay, as we begin to close, I'd love to ask you, Olivia, is there any final thought that's come to mind, something that the Holy Spirit has reminded you of while we've been chatting, or a specific verse or characteristic of God that's particularly encouraging for you that you would love to leave us with?
I think that it's really important to remember in the midst of the practical wisdom that we've talked about today, which I think is really good and helps us draw closer to God, is that again, like it's ultimately just about loving the Lord and seeking him. And when you surrender your life to him in a way that says like, I'm willing to do what you have for me, I'm willing to step into an unknown that feels scary, or I'm willing to stay where I am. And maybe that feels just as scary as starting something different. That just being humble and being open to what the Lord has for you, I think is all that we can do, because we're not always going to make the perfect decision, and we're not always going to feel like we know exactly what the Lord has for us or wants for us. But seeking him and having just a genuine love and adoration for him and choosing to praise him, I think is the most refreshing thing we can do for a weary soul. I have this distinct memory of when I was a little bit younger and I was so sad and anxious. I don't even remember what about, but I went to the Psalms to find something encouraging. And I kept just finding verses that were saying like, praise the Lord, or the Lord is good because of this and that. And this was so terrible of me. I just remember thinking like, this isn't helpful. Like I wanted something that said like, the Lord is going to comfort me, or the Lord has a good plan for me. And like in that moment, I was like, oh, this is so awful of me, because like, that's exactly what I needed, was to stop and praise the Lord, not have every situation in my life fixed. And so that would just be, if you take one thing away from this, my encouragement to you is take time to praise the Lord and adore him for what he's done and the fact that you get to know him. What a gift. We talked about this a little bit ago. Like we kind of fool ourselves if we think that anything in life isn't an unknown. Like there's some things that are really obvious. Also, like, I don't know what's going to happen today. I have my plans for the rest of the day, but who knows what the Lord has for me. So trusting in the Lord and being okay with knowing that he could change like the plans that you have for your life in an instant. And that's going to be hard and challenging, but it's okay because he's with you and walking with you and just loves you every step of the way. So that would be my ending piece of encouragement.
I love that thought. and I'm going to share this because it's come to mind several times and we'll probably cut it. But I was thinking about how one of the unknowns that you experienced was where you were going to go to college. And when God gave you an answer, he gave you a different answer than the answer you wanted. You got to the known and it wasn't what you thought or wanted it to be. Mm-mm. And of course, I wish you had gotten to go to the dream school that you wanted to go to and God redirected you. But we wouldn't have gotten to be friends. Mm-mm. And we wouldn't be having this podcast conversation if you'd have gone to the school that you most wanted to go to. We wouldn't have known each other if you'd have gotten what you wanted. And I just thought that's so interesting to think how our lives take turns because of how God directs us in ways that we don't know or expect.
Oh, for sure. Like there are so many things that I think about like all the time. Like I would not have this gift or this good thing from the Lord had I gotten what I thought I wanted. And it's such a mercy of him to take the things that we think we want. Because had my life gone the way that I wanted it to, it would look very different. And I don't think it would look as good by any means.
God knows better.
He knows better.
Yeah.
I could listen to Olivia talk all day long about God's faithfulness in her life, and I hope, listener, that you were so encouraged by this conversation. A lot of things jumped out to me in this episode as being really practical, but also really relatable. Brooke, I wonder if there were a few things that stuck out to you as things you'll remember moving forward.
Oh, there totally were. I remember listening to this conversation and just the whole time being like, I should write that down. I should write that down. I should write. And then I just eventually did start taking notes as I was listening. And one thing that really blessed me that Olivia said was this idea of, we should go to God with our unknowns in humility and trust, not anxiety and urgency. And she kind of expounded on her point by saying, if you're building a relationship with God and pursuing the Lord, your relationship with him informs how you navigate those unknowns. And so you are able to go to the Lord with them in humility and trust and not only go to him in the anxiety and urgency of the unknowns. And that was I think such a compelling way to say it and was convicting for me to hear, honestly, of like, man, does my continual relationship with God inform how I navigate the unknowns of my life? And I think too, something that she shared that I've been thinking a lot about, well, what would that look like in my life tangibly? Like, what would it look like practically? Because I think that's our heart of Encouraged and Equipped, is to not just have these kind of lofty conversations, and we don't want the listener to feel like, you're either getting it or you're not. But this idea of what would it look like to incorporate these truths into your life so that you can be set apart and be blessed by the truth of knowing God. And I think another thing Olivia, talked about that made me think about that was this idea of taking our unknowns to God through gratitude. And when she said that, my wheels started turning of like, what does that mean tangibly? And it got me thinking, and even thinking with so many women from our church family that I know and love and have watched them do this really well and have learned from and hope to apply better in my own life, is I think taking unknowns to God through gratitude doesn't mean, hey, God, I'm miserable, and you just like change the tone of your prayer, right? But it changes your action of, man, in my unknowns, it affects, like, I don't push God away in the unknown, or I don't doubt or question his goodness or his sovereignty, which I think is a super common, outflow of unknowns in my life. But it's like, whatever it is, I might navigate, whether that's a tragedy or a sickness or a job loss or a strange relationship, whatever the unknown is, it's like, man, to give that to God through gratitude is like, man, Lord, thank you for relationships and thank you for wisdom that helps me navigate them. And God, thank you for entrusting me with these things. God, let it be done in your way for your glory. And I think really just applying truth and living out my faith in unknowns, wholeheartedly and unapologetically. And so I hope that's encouraging to you, listener. And I mean, it's given me a lot to think about, and I think I'm going to have to keep going back. This will be an episode I keep going back to.
I agree. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll see you guys next week on Encouraged and Equipped.
Thanks for listening. For more episodes, be sure to follow Encouraged and Equipped.